Happy Holy Day, Moors, and welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and more science, an awakening experience for all ages. The 1493 Papal Bull decree aimed to justify Christian European explorers' claims on land and waterways they allegedly discovered, and to promote Christian domination and superiority. It has been applied and remains in effect throughout Africa, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and the Americas. Tonight, our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey, presents Aboriginal Titles versus Unam Sanctum Doctrine of Discovery, Colonial Claims. Let's receive him.
Islam. Gotta make them. One of the things that we need to discuss, particularly now in relationship to the political atmosphere that's going on right now with the biological warfare on the people, the economic problems, the so-called, which must be qualified, job qualities problems, etc.
I just have your wrong name up there. It says it's me. Go ahead.
Yes.
This is not Dr. G. This is Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey. We apologize.
Yes. So we need to go over some things to clarify for a lot of people who are becoming aware of how, or somewhat aware of how things have been operating on the planet as of late, particularly because so many people are being injured in many ways. So many families have been systematically and by design destroyed and dissolved and broken up. Relationships, the natural relationship between man and woman has been systematically attacked, to whereas the problems inherent in the social structure are taken as normal today. All of these are residual, what you call fodder, of Unam Sanctum and Doctrine of Discovery policy operations by the hybrid Europeans under the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed operations known as Christian colonial operations, which is more cover of actually Constantine operations on the planet. So we want to bring some things to your attention and trust that you start paying attention to certain things in your life, and also to try to get our people back into the ancient Asiatic African traditions of literature, philology, and reading in general, grammatication, etc. in general, which has been known to be solidly a part of Asiatic African culture, but has been pretty much lost in the Western Hemisphere due to colonial operations. I would like to share with you, since the title we're dealing with is Aboriginal titles and versus Unam Sanctum, we've done multiple angles of sharing information with you relative to Unam Sanctum operations and also the Doctrine of Discovery. So write those down so that you can do a little bit of research to clarify, because we're not getting into those as subject matter in the immediate. though they're related in the subject matter. They are subjects within their own right. However, because of time constraint, we want to remind you, to those of you who are not aware of what Unam Sanctum is and the Doctrine of Discovery is, that you become familiar with that. Because the operations of Unam Sanctum and Doctrine of Discovery, the effects that it's had on Aboriginal and indigenous people has been falsely classified under what they have, the social engineers have been calling racism and prejudice. And so the average person who has been subjected to the Frederick T. Gates and John D. Rockefeller education systems will usually respond to the effects of Unam Sanctum and Doctrine of Discovery as racism and prejudice, which is actually a diversion, and it actually throws them off of what's really going on. And of course, after generations of this practice, the younger generations have no true reference points by which they can address these problems that they're suffering from, and therefore are sort of like disarmed intellectually and in jurisprudence to protect themselves and their families, etc. It's sort of like being in a situation whereas they give children matches, and then remove water from bottles or something like that, and in place of the water or the bottles, give them gasoline, and then tell them in emergency, pour the gasoline on. And this is pretty much what has been happening to our people in the real world of civics and politics, where they have been trained to keep arguing racism and prejudice and ignore the reality of their sufferings, economic and political, which happens to be colonial occupation under Unam Sanctum and the Doctrine of Discovery, which most of you know about this, but very few people, when you listen to people discussing the problems that we've been having on the planet in these late years, they all almost exclusively run to race and prejudice argument, and very few ever talks about Unam Sanctum and the Doctrine of Discovery. I'm going to go to Webster's Dictionary of the English Language, and this is Noah Webster, 1828. And I'm going to read to you Aboriginal. Aboriginal is Latin, it's an adjective, and it means the first, the original, the prime, the primitive. Aboriginal peoples are the first inhabitants of a land or country or area, geographical, etc. And in relationship to America, you would be talking about the Aboriginal tribes or peoples of America. And so logically, the Aboriginals of America are the Americans. And so we're going to go again into the dictionary and look up American. And keep these in mind and mark these down. Remember, this is Webster's Dictionary, 1828. And this is to keep our concepts clear as we're discussing these matters. America and American. American. Now, you know that the hybrid Europeans have been going around the world in these late years claiming to be Americans. And when they write the history books for activities that has taken place on the land in the North, they refer to themselves as Americans. As an example, they will write a lot of their escapades as in this manner to throw people off. The Mexican-American War, as an example, that implies that Mexicans are not Americans. See the trap? And then the hybrid Europeans claims to be the Americans. And so it implies that they are Americans or they have a sovereign claim on the land. And people who don't pay attention to what you call connotative linguistics don't recognize that the foundation of a lot of claims are indeed, upon examinations, lies, falsehoods, misrepresentations. However, as people are being trained or so-called educated within these venues, they themselves pick up this connotative linguistics and they promote it thereafter to themselves and to their children in the name of knowledge, in the name of history, in the name of law, etc., and in effect actually abandon their rights of claim by virtually taking on the connotative linguistics, whereas they claim things to be what they are not. And upon this ignorance, or what you will call abandonment of truth or misinformation, the hybrid Europeans take the claim of Americans and then claim the sovereign right, divine right of the people and the land. And this is one of your systematic psychological warfare activities instituted under hybrid European colonial operations of Unam Sanctum. And this is where they have claimed the bodies and the souls of men and instituted it as a governmental policy in all of their colonial escapades. So anywhere where the hybrid European goes around the world, the first thing they do, one of the first things they do is attack anywhere or any places or any established institutions, whereas such as museums or anything that you may look in that type of order, or any of your traditional buildings, steal the artifacts, destroy what they cannot steal, and reconstruct the history. That's called reconstruction. That's one of their favorite words to do. On top of that, change the name and the appellations of the natural people, and change the names of the geographical aggregate land areas, and then false claim of copyright of the name, claim the land that is named by them that actually belongs to Aboriginal people. The same way for colonial operations, where they would kill off and murder shakuns, potentists, in all of your matriarchs, etc., in Asia and Africa, in relationship to whatever lands they invade, and then claim that position. And so one of the practices that they do is to conquer a people is to systematically genocide the people off and then claim the people's name as a trophy and then promote history under that name, etc., which is also impersonation and impostorship, etc. And one of the things that the hybrid Europeans have traditionally called those operations in a visual format, whereas whether they're doing what you would call theater or singing or entertainment, they would call it blackface. This is where they would take coal oil, or coal pigment, etc., and wipe their pale skins on their faces with it, and then claim to be Moors and Indians, which is another misterm that they have applied to the Asiatic Africans of the North Gate, etc., and then make their Unam Sanctum claims thereafter. And so one of the things that for most of you who have been keeping up with the House of Reawakening Minds over the years, we've shared with you as an example, when we have suggested to people to go into the congressional records and read in detail House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress, in session with James Traficant, who they later murdered and said that he had an accident on his farm. They actually eliminated him, or what they like to call neutralized. And he did a speech on the Congress, in 93 in that area of time. And he's talking about the U.S. corporation bankruptcy. But in the process of talking about the U.S. bankruptcy, he also reveals the fact, which is not taught in these days, that prior to 1913, that all property in America was held by allodial title or by Aboriginal title. And of course, people who know the history are not unfamiliar with that. However, many people don't emphasize that. Here at the House of Reawakening Minds, we emphasize that because it's very important. And it's also, it's sort of like, you ever see those little games that you used to play with children on TV shows, and they'll show little articles or things or toys or objects and say one, these things are not like the other. And it's sort of like a match game. And for adults, they use those kind of things in like in casinos where you pull a lever and try to match either numbers or symbols or faces or things in order to win. It is not unlike that. So today, in today's world, in the political venue of what is known as real property and real estate, etc., and the social engineering operations of what is called mortgages and deeds, many of the people are not aware and never even heard of Aboriginal titles. However, I want to remind all of you who are listening tonight to write that down so you can go into details. What we may do in the future, and one of the things that I had planned to do, but I don't think it would be productive because we always get lost in time, is go over some of the cases in relationship to Aboriginal titles to give you even more reference. We may do that in the future, but what I want to do tonight is lay down these facts to you to get you in a frame of thought, because our people need to actually start getting seriously active to try to slow down the designed destruction of their families and of our communities, which is not beginning, but has always been enforced. However, what's been happening as of late is that they have accelerated those activities. And the different operations of genocide, which are presently happening, including the biological warfare that's really pretty much come out in the open, attack on the people through vaccines and through viruses, etc., and through directed energy weapons disguised as climate control or climate problems, or how do you say, the earth is warming type thing, as if seasons don't change. But most people are not aware, and we understand that they're also using directed energy weapons to accelerate the fires that you see, as well as using other micro technologies, some of them called HARP and CERN, etc., to create what you call flooding at the shore areas, etc., and implying to the people that these are natural occurrences, though some of them are, because we have cyclical activities that the people who understand how the earth works and cosmology understand cyclically that these things take place. But of course, you already know that most of our people have not been connected to their African Asiatic history and cultures, and therefore have lost much of the sensitivities and knowledge of the cosmological nature of our life cycles, and including the metrology sciences of how we laid out cities and also villages, etc., and why some Africans are nomadic and some are more stable according to the areas. Well, they are aware of the cosmological relationship with ourselves and nature, and therefore build and design things accordingly. But without having the knowledge of the Asiatic African culture and the metrology principles, many of our people are caught off guard, not understanding that the earth goes through cycles and that we would design our cities and our towns and villages harmonic with nature. And so things that may not appear to people in contemporary times as being advanced or progressive has more to do with the knowledge of the workings of nature as opposed to the concepts of solid and very established brick buildings in certain areas, and why do they not do them in all areas, etc. So that's a consideration for you to take into things for you to take into consideration. So we're going to use we're going to look at American and remind you of things that need to be known. America, one of the great continents, and they will say discovered. It's not discovered. That's another false claim. But anyway, by Sebastian Cabot, etc. So it extends from the 8th degree of north to the 54th degree of south latitude, and from the 35th to the 156th degree of longitude west from Greenwich, being about 9,000 miles in length. And that's just a general geographical longitude and latitude designation of America. And understand that America is not Europe, and understand that the hybrid Europeans that came here under conquest operations are not Americans. One of the mistakes that our people keep making is calling them Americans because they have rewritten or reconstructed history and documents and claiming to be Americans, but our people need to know the motive is so they could claim your land. And many of our people, it never dawns on them that those are Unam Sanctum colonial operations. They are not true realities. They're not true principles of consanguinity. These are not based in blood and pedigree. They're based in conquest. And so you have fake Americans, which would be the corporate United States of America Corporation, registered, a trading company registered in Austria, with its members claiming to be Americans through their corporate activities. And then you have the Aboriginal Moroccans, or descendants of Moroccans, which are called Americans, and in short referred to as Moors, and sometimes tagged as Indians, etc. And so you have Americans, and then you have imposters. So the Americans, so we can get this very clear right up front. American is a native of America. The originals, this is Aboriginal, and originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper complexioned natural peoples of the land. And then later, the hybrid Europeans, under what they call jus soli, which is a legal term meaning that under jurisprudence or under naturalization, and many of them have never been naturalized, call themselves Americans, and then they added that falsely to the definition American, and they have been promoting it for since the 1800s. And this is how it has gotten into the psyche of the people that the hybrid Europeans are Americans, when in fact they're not, never were, and are not. But this is from a political and a conquest position. This is necessary for them to have a foundation upon which they reconstruct history and upon which they make claims on the land and the resources of the Americans by claiming to be Americans, then systematically genociding out the true Americans or Aboriginals. So we want to talk about that. And I think it would be helpful also for people to know these facts. And Dr. Naila, for the people who want this in the future, for the cost of mailing and the printing, you can send this to them. All right, you've had this before. I'm going to read it out.
Okay.
All right. Now this is a general public notice, and this is for Aboriginal people particularly because they've been under the control of the Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, who has been controlling the medias and the education systems. All natural people, and including the citizens, should be aware of these facts and know that the following are laws and issues applicable at North America via the United States. The following information and facts should be read and analyzed with the knowledge and conditions that the reader is conscious of the lawful distinctions made between constitutionally sanctioned laws, constitutionally sanctioned departments, constitutionally sanctioned offices, and or constitutionally sanctioned entities or activities de jure, and those laws or policies which have been or are constructed under a color of law or under a color of authority, being unlawful, i.e., de facto, or unconstitutional in character, unconstitutional in law, unconstitutional in history, unconstitutional in political form and social concepts. Corrections are always in order. And we have a list of fundamental facts that must be in your mind. This would also give you support in your cognate arguments in relationship to Aboriginal titles, also, which we're talking about here tonight. And we're going to list 33 of them. And so, because much of this, some of you will not retain just in the conversation, go over this tape, go over this video later in your spare time. You can write these things down. And in the near future, we'll see that this information is available to anyone who wants to mail to the House of Reawakening Minds and receive this information. It's not new information. It's just that a lot of people are not aware of these things, which is also why sometimes when we share information, people who are not aware of facts can be influenced by trolls and other people who have been beneficiaries of your ignorance and have been taking advantage of you and don't want you to have this information. And this is, again, why a lot of times when we share information with people, paid trolls will do as much as they can to distract the people or to try to discourage them from paying attention to this information. But with this information, we will give you reference points also so you can recognize that these things are established facts. Number one, the IRS, which you know as the Internal Revenue Service, is not a constitutionally sanctioned United States Republic government agency. The IRS is an agency of the International Monetary Fund, known as the IMF. For your reference, you can see diversified metal products versus IRS at CY 83 405E EJE United States. And this would be in law. This would be Public Law 94 564. There's a little bit more, and it's also in the Senate's records, etc. And that's the reorganization plan that was set forth, number 26, Public Law 102 391. And this is in reference to that because many people right now, particularly since they've been alleged to be in this so-called big debt, etc., are being attacked by agents of the IRS to steal the rest of their estates, and they have no idea that this organization is actually International Monetary Fund and was actually hired by the persons that you thought was congressmen and senators to rob you and to share some of the spoils with them. But it's hidden in what you call slush funds and offshore accounts and so-called aid to foreign countries. That's how they disguise what they've been stealing from the people. Includes why a lot of your economic problems exist today for that purpose. Number 2, IMF, International Monetary Fund, is an agency of the United Nations, UN. And you can find that in your Henry Campbell Black's Law Dictionary, the 6th edition, in page 816. So when the trolls get on and try to tell you that we're making this stuff up, which they will do because they have to do what they're paid for to do, and many of them have been beneficiaries of the ignorance. However, do some research for yourselves and then recognize how you've been attacked by persons you thought was your government and how they've been systematically attacking you over generations and have brought you to this low ebb, which you are right now, and with many people not knowing where to turn, particularly since within months, many of the people will be thrown out on the street in their curb, based on alleged debts that is claimed by persons who claim to be government and who have taken censuses and claim to you to be U.S. citizens and then claim to you to be subject under their American law and actually stealing your estate, which is a completion of the operations of Unam Sanctum and the Doctrine of Discovery. It's not racism and prejudice. It's Unam Sanctum, Doctrine of Discovery operations. However, you must understand that people who are Aboriginal, who have copper complexion skin, are the Americans. And if you don't make the claim, because you are the American superior, understand that you abandon the last vestige of rights of claims that are left that they haven't already stolen. Problem of it is many people are not aware of it, which is why we chose the title, Aboriginal Titles, versus Unam Sanctum, Doctrine of Discovery operations and claims made by the colonial operators. Meaning that we're making the distinction between the true Americans and the fake ones who are claiming to be Americans that look like this. We used to call them, our forefathers used to call them paleface. It's not a negative. It's only to make the distinction, understand that a paleface is not an American. And that's not to put them down. It's not a slander. It's not intended to be. It's intended to address a problem that really needs to be addressed. Because our people are being destroyed by the day. This is aside from the fact of the ritual killings and assassinations that they do with our people to keep them in a low state of mind and in fear in relationship to their rights, not only to the land, but their rights to even life, their rights to travel, etc. All of these are by practice under Unam Sanctum and Doctrine of Discovery being attacked and abridged by the fake Americans. And they're not Americans, by the fake hybrid Europeans claiming to be Americans. Number 3, the United States has not had a treasury since 1921 AD. You will find that in 41 Statute, Chapter 214, page 654. Number 4, the United States Treasury is now the International Monetary Fund, known as the IMF. So when you hear them saying the U.S. Treasury, the United States Treasury, they're actually talking about the IMF. Know that to be the fact. And that would be found in Presidential Documents, Volume 24, Number 4, page 112. United States Code, Title 22, etc., 284, 2887. Number 5, the United States does not have any employees because there is no longer a legitimate United States. No more reorganizations. After over 200 years of bankruptcy, it is finally over, and that is known as Executive Order 12803. I repeat, Executive Order 12803. Number 6, the FCC, the CIA, the FBI, and NASA, and all of the other alphabetical gangs were never a lawful part of the United States government, even though the United States government, through its trustees or representatives, which you know as the congressmen and senators, etc., all held stock in the agencies. So the truth of the matter is, this can be proven in U.S. versus Strang, Strang, 254 U.S. 491, and in Lewis versus U.S., etc. Now, these can be referenced in law and in law cases so that you can see that these persons who are claiming to be congressmen and senators are actually trustees for the foreign FCC, CIA, FBI, NASA, etc., which are all foreign entities operating on the land under the Doctrine of Discovery and under Unam Sanctum operations. And so therefore, you need not be confused about what's been happening to you and your family and your children, and where as commercial mercenaries have been systematically and ritualistically pulling men and women out of cars, out of their vehicles on the streets and murdering them before a lot of people, and nothing occurs, even though people may be standing there with cameras and cell phones, etc., and they not understand why this stuff is happening, etc., and may protest or complain, but they need to know that those are Unam Sanctum operations. And those persons are sent out there by those very people you've been calling your congressmen and senators, who are trustees for the IMF, actually, and not literally and honestly, not your government. They are actually, in this unfortunate reality, your enemies. They're not your government, although they're governing over you. You must make that distinction. They are not Americans. They are Unam Sanctum Doctrine of Discovery operators and members of the Roman Curia. And I know it's uncomfortable, but you need to get over it and start getting real about your life, because they've been real about starting to take the people's lives without recourse. 7, Social Security numbers are issued by the United Nations. How many of you knew that? Now you do. That Social Security numbers are issued by the United Nations, and the United Nations is the IMF. Keep that in mind. So when you see the US, the IMF, and the United Nations, they're all one and the same extended entity operations under Unam Sanctum and Doctrine of Discovery, under different names to keep the people confused. So Social Security numbers are issued by the United Nations through the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and the application for a Social Security number is the SS5 form. And the Department of the Treasury, which is really the IMF, issues the SS5 forms and not the Social Security Administration. That's a front and a fraud. It's issued by the International Monetary Fund. And the new SS5 forms do not state who publishes them, while the old form states they are from the Department of the Treasury. And you'll find that at 20 CFR Council on Foreign Relations, Chapter 111, Subpart B, 422-103. So keep this in mind. These are common things that should be known by everybody in their everyday operations, so they're not continuously blindsided by the political and economic attacks which are made by persons who keep claiming to be your government, who keeps claiming to be your mayors, who keeps claiming to be your governors, who keeps claiming to be your congressmen, who keeps claiming to be your senators, and keep claiming falsely to be creatures of the Constitution and treaties, both of which they are not. They are, in fact, imposters and operators for the doctrine of discovery, and their claims upon you has created the false so-called national debts that they've been perpetrating against the people, and then which they are now making claims to collect on, which is really what the debt is and what the real problem that you have going on in what is known as world trade markets, or windows freezing up, and the credit markets freezing up, the credit windows of the world freezing up. And of course, in the process, their claims are to be recognized as debts, and their claim are and have been for substance, that is gold, silver, and the people's estates, i.e. the land, and all of it, not just the fiat that has been issued, the private commercial paper that has been issued by members of the Curia under the Federal Reserve. It is also the mortgages and deeds that they have falsely placed on the land since 1913, upon which they have been making their claims. And understand the counter to this. Number one, with the Aboriginal people, their counter to this, because they have very few defense mechanisms left, because they have been pretty much subjugated almost totally. And the families have been destroyed, private and personal relationships have been destroyed, and their economics has been destroyed, and therefore they have very little resource to fight back with. The international principle and the divine principle upon which the right of claim is made is called nationalization. That's number one. The estate claim would be what is known as Aboriginal title. What's been taking place around the country in small areas and small venues, and the information and the activities have been suppressed. The civic activities have been suppressed, and most of these activities have not been published for the public to go over. But you'll find it taking place in the Western Hemisphere and in other parts of the world, and up north to Australia, etc. Is Aboriginal peoples, i.e. Moors, making Aboriginal claims in the corrupted judicial systems, and in some places winning. For those of you who are able to do some research, you can look at a couple of cases that are going on right now in this current time in Canada, or what you call Canada, etc. And one of those cases I'll share with you in the future. That was one of the things that I was going to introduce tonight, but because of time constraint and because I was actually busy, I had limited time to get things together and make my travels down here. So I'll use a future reference for that. But I want you to look at Aboriginal title cases, contemporary and current, going on in the Western Hemisphere, or activated at this time in the Western Hemisphere, and you're going to find some of those cases which are happening. However, what we've been trying to do, on another hand, is get the Aboriginal people at North America who has been wrongly governed and misgoverned and miseducated and misdirected at North America under Roman Curia members who are owners of the United States Corporation Company, which is an occupational colonial force of subdivision of the hybrid Europeans of Britain, of Europe, etc., of England, etc., to become active and to start making Aboriginal claim of the land, etc., and logically all accoutrements in relationship to it, including the resources, are part of their right of inheritance. To interrupt, or what you would call to obstruct, or to escheat the Aboriginal people, it has much to do with the clever legal processes of obstruction that have been known traditionally as branding or tagging, and the nom de guerre systems, which most of you know about, etc. So brands would be terms, not consanguine pedigree identities. They would be terms. Such terms have been known as Negro, Black, Indian, Latino, nigger, persons of color, etc. All of these terms which have been trained by the Gates Foundation for the people to accept as consanguine are in fact nom de guerre, but the purposes that they serve for the progenitors of these tags is that it disconnects the people from right of claim and also disconnects them from a lawful process to make Aboriginal claims, because there's no such people that have claim to the land. These are persons who are tagged by hybrid European colonial occupiers in the Western Hemisphere. Although these tags have been promoted and projected around the world via media, via filmed, via reconstructed books, etc. However, they're still false, but their purpose and function have been very successful for the hybrid Europeans in making their so-called American claims, and therefore taxing people and charging Aboriginal people to rent their own lands. And this has been going on for decades, and our people didn't even know that the rents that they were paying on their own land is all a fraud. But they assumed that the people who were governing and who had set up municipal government were actually legitimately Americans, when in fact they were not, are not, and never will be. However, and it's unfortunate also, is that the true Americans have to stop claiming to be something in who they are not, i.e. that includes all of the nom de guerre that I just mentioned and other tags that were put on the Moors, etc., the Almoracans. So when you hear me say Moor, that's simply short for the Almoracans or descendants of Moroccans, etc., the true Americans, etc., many of which and of whom over the years being miseducated by the Frederick T. Gates Foundation, which is the partner of John D. Rockefeller, who set up the entire education system, the General Education Board, which is that the foundation of all your learning institutions operating on our land particularly since the area of 1902, have had control over the people's points of reference, etc. And of course, the Doctrine of Discovery is the claim where, from a legal perspective, that the hybrid Europeans have been claiming land parcels all over North America, etc. And you also, for some of you, and my son, Dr. Hannibal, had shared with me a video earlier this week. We were talking, and he shared with me a video, which I'll share with Dr. Nail a little later. And you'll see, even with the treaties with many of the Americans, our brothers from the South, known as Mexicans, whereas they are bringing up the treaties where these hybrid Europeans have been claiming areas of California, Texas, etc., which are really part of Mexico, Nevada, etc., and from a law perspective have proven these people to be a fraud. And rather than give the land back, they're burning a lot of the land, etc., doing fracking to make the water toxic and things like that, relative to the future potential of the people regaining rights to their land. However, I'm also encouraging the Aboriginals of the North to start becoming more active than you have in relationship to your birthrights and your nationalities, and make rights of your Aboriginal title claims, even though there will be resistance, because it's, put it this way, their intention is to kill you off. Your intention is to be passive and inactive, it's almost like an what you would call a surrender or an abandonment. An abandonment of your claim of right to the land, and of course, a surrender that you're surrendering those rights. And a lot of people are not aware that a lot of the political activities that are taking place right now on the planet, with a lot of the biological warfare that's been instituted against and upon the people right now, that they think is something else, is part of the doctrine of discovery operations, because they recognize that the people are waking up and they really need to accelerate killing them off. And there's two other things that they've been doing systematically to accelerate the genocide activities, and that is where they've used the Christian black codes to become between men and women. Whereas you'll see in these days, men and women are, rather than harmonizing with each other, are competing with each other as enemies, and think that each of them are the problem, not knowing that there's a puppeteer in the background. And that's these people who you thought was your government, who are actually executing doctrine of discovery policies. And it's actually gotten so bad that you'll see that many men, and I've known many of them, and actually even myself being among them, that don't even participate in that mating game anymore, knowing that if you deal with someone who's under the Christian black codes, that they will indeed destroy you. And it doesn't mean they don't care about you, don't mean they don't love you, etc. But they don't know that there's a puppeteer behind all of these operations to break up families. And in reference to their directives under the Doctrine of Discovery, many of you who have Executive Order 11490, well-known, commonly known as the King Alfred Plan, and the Rex 84 Plan, where they inform the politicians and the corporate owners of corporations under them to do such things that are necessary to dissolve the families of all Aboriginal peoples. And I think a lot of times people don't pay attention to it because they've been sacrificing some of their own in order to cover up the doctrine of discovery operations. And so when the people start seeing the destruction of the families, etc., and the destructions of relationship by virtue of the social engineering, they'll say, look, they're doing this to everyone, as a rationale to overlook the fact that the Aboriginals are and were the target. However, the collateral damage that is done by throwing, as some people use in the colloquial term, throwing under the bus a lot of so-called lower class and middle class hybrid Europeans who they will tag under the Whiggamore Party as white people, is 1854 Knights of Columbus Ku Klux Klan oath, where the hybrid Europeans start calling themselves Americans and then start calling themselves white Americans, etc. Understand that that is a political platform, a train of thought that is promoted in 1854 on up, etc. However, they're being thrown under the bus in the collateral operations of Unam Sanctum claims and Doctrine of Discovery claims. That you'll read about these activities in under such titles as the middle class is being destroyed. You'll hear those terms in the main media, mainstream media. Middle class, jobs lost, things like the airlines are getting ready to lay off 100,000 people, terms like that. What that really is, it's ongoing genocide operations where they're sacrificing some of their own to cover up the Unam Sanctum Doctrine of Discovery operations. Again, this is why it's important for the Aboriginal people to start making Aboriginal title claims to try to save, because we understand this, let's be real about this. Not going to save a lot of people, because a lot of people refuse to deal with knowledge. A lot of people have been late to the responsibility of self-governing or trying to govern their own lives. And a lot of us are going to be sacrificed because of the ongoing, not coming, the ongoing war against us, etc. Dr. Naila, yes.
I just wanted to add, you were talking about the relationships between melanated men and women being, strained and under attack.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm looking at on the page of BLM,
It's part of it.
And I'm looking at about them. And so when you read this, it says, we affirm the lives of Black, queer, and trans folks, disabled folks, undocumented folks, folks with records, women, and all Black lives along the gender spectrum. Our network centers those who have been marginalized within Black liberation movements. What's missing from that statement are men, our melanated men. They don't say anything about the man. They don't say, of course, folks that have been folks with records, but not all of our men have records. So they don't specifically say anything about the man,
of course not,
about the family,
of course not,
and what they're about has nothing to do.
Of course not. Now, the system's not broke. The system works very well. The problem that the people have in general when they look at things like this, right, is they look at it from the perspective that, quote unquote, the system is broke. No, the system works perfectly, and the system instituted under Doctrine of Discovery has been successful in dissolving the family. You got to remember, and this is not a mark or a strike against people who are either gay or lesbian or anything like it. It's not even a strike against them. That has been pushed as part of the genocide operations. See, just like this, a woman and a woman does not produce life.
True.
And it's against nature. It has nothing to do with the person or the person's personality or whether they're good people or bad people. We're not even condemning it. We just look at the facts. A man with a man produces no life. Woman is the gate of life, no matter how you twist it, fold it. Man and woman is the foundation of nature of life in all species, in nature, in divine law. That's not condemning people who are gay. That's just a fact. But what the people don't understand, I think very often, because you'll see them emphasizing it now or getting people to accept it under the guise that they care about people. But people should care about people because they're human beings, not based on their sexual orientation. But you notice how that's skipped over because the fact of the matter is this is the fact. All right, number one, males are outnumbered by female by nature because this is how nature works, right? So if they can separate families, get young males to start thinking about trying to be a woman, inducing the young males that they cannot make a living to serve their families unless they do drugs or sell drugs because they'll lock them out of other parts of resource acquisition or control. Use women to promote this and use women under the Black codes to emasculate their men, which will cause a greater divide. And when you have men who would have a desire to support and to protect their families, to be condemned by women as being anti-feminist type thing. And then you have jailing of young men at a very young age. Then you have them being drugged in schools. Right. Now, keep this in mind. School nurses feeding prescriptions to children, even against parents' wishes, they're not doctors. And they're not pharmacists. How is it that they are licensed to drug children? It's because they're targeted. So you'll see a lot of these activities in school where they're drugging the children. If you do any research, you'll find that the major target is young males. usually the women or the young females are more protected, and so people don't pay attention to the fact that they're attacking the young males. And this is actually part of the genocide operations of Unam Sanctum and the Doctrine of Discovery, to tear the family apart. And of course, these young men growing up are not aware until a later age that their role as protectors and providers for their families have been neutralized at a very young age. So many of them get out into the world of family totally handicapped, totally disabled, having no access to the resources of the land, not knowing that the land is theirs, having no access to the economics, not knowing that the resources that create the economic are theirs, thinking that the people who are governing over them and their families, whether under the guise of human services or family services, etc., under the Margaret Sanger operations of family planning, under the abortion clinics, which are all part of the Margaret Sanger operations, of the genocide operations of Unam Sanctum and the Doctrine of Discovery, having no idea that these are actually continued institutionalized acts of war against them. And as they grow up, not recognizing that the females are being trained in many instances to be agents of the state against their own interest, against the male, and over a period of time are actually helping to destroy their own family structures, which of course is what you're experiencing right now on many fronts, in many areas across the land, etc. And not knowing that all of this is being engineered. It is not natural to them, it's being engineered. And then, of course, many of them not having a knowledge of that engineering think that there's a problem between men and women from a genetic perspective, when that is not and never has been the truth. They are actually under attack. Again, for the few who are aware that they're actually being attacked and who want to try to help mitigate or counter the Unam Sanctum Doctrine of Discovery operations, one important fact that you need to be aware of is and are the issues and the right of claim relative to allodial titles. Because what it will do is start putting a wall between yourself, and the owners and operators of the human trafficking trading entity companies, known as these local municipal government corporate entities that are not creatures of the Constitution, but are actually foreign, alien, hybrid European companies, corporations that were constructed for the very purpose of actually escheating the estates of Aboriginal peoples under the guise, hidden guise, of the Doctrine of Discovery and Unam Sanctum operations. So rather than say it's Doctrine of Discovery, they'll have terms like City of Camden, or the City of Philadelphia, City of New York, as an example, City of Los Angeles, as an example, City of Oakland, City of San Francisco, things like this. And people who don't really understand this would not recognize that these political metaphor phrases like city of are actually not creatures of treaties, nor creatures of the Constitution coming from treaties that were set in place for preserving the people's rights, etc., under Constitution operations. And knowing that people have not been aware of that is also why we shared some of these things with you on this paper here, which we'll share with some of you in the future, those who ask for it, because it's 33. And of course, I didn't go through all of them. I went through some of them to show you an example of what we're presenting to you, etc., backed by reference. And it's backed by reference because we already know that the Unam Sanctum operators already pay people to troll and to try to dismiss this information we've been sharing with you because it helps the people. And also with the knowledge empowers people, not beliefs. Beliefs empowers no one. You know, believing in Santa Claus doesn't get you gifts. It really doesn't. It's fun and it's, you know, bright lights and everything, but believing in Santa Claus gets you no gifts. It's probably because your mother and your father or aunts and uncles and people who love you sacrifice and go into debt to acquire things for you, to bring joy in the winter solstice season. The traditions that has always been part of African culture of gift giving, not to be confused with the commercialization of the winter solstice, mind you. However, again, I'll remind you that belief in Santa Clauski does not give you gifts. All right, so let's get over that. Again, I want you to write this down so that you'll stay focused on the purpose of our discussion tonight. Aboriginal titles, ABORIGINAL, titles, TITLES. And you can put that also in harmony with what is known as allodial titles. Allodial, ALLDIL. All right, LODILAL. Now I'm going to look up allodial for you to make sure that you are familiar with what allodial is, because it's very important. So when you're looking at Aboriginal title, you're looking in the nature of allodial title. It has not been promoted among the people because they don't want you to think like this. They don't want you to know these things, and they definitely don't want you exercising such knowledge. This is a major reason why expect that you're going to get opposition, and then you're going to get people who will troll and try to discourage you from paying attention to this logically, because many of them have stock in many of these corporate entities that have actually been robbing you. Now, allodial means free, not holding to any lord and not holding to any superior, owned without obligation or vassalage or fealty. It is the opposite of feudal. Now, keep in mind that Aboriginal titles, which are allodial, were operative on this land prior to 1913. So we're not talking ancient Egyptian history where you got to dig up 3 pyramids to find this out. We're not talking about centuries ago in the concepts of how history has been taught in North America. You're talking about within the past century. You're talking in a period of time that many of the people are still living today in their physical form. So prior to 1913, all property on the land was held in allodial title. I don't have to ask you, because I already know that most of the people that are even listening to this program may not even have ever heard of what an allodial title is, or Aboriginal title. And the people who have been dancing with them in these little organizations and caring about our people and loving the children and our communities never bring this kind of discussion up. I don't have to ask you to wonder why. The fact that they don't should be self-evident.
A couple questions here.
Yes.
Richard Amunrabe says, can we just write land title / allodial title on any form or on paper?
Of course. This is basic. Look, let's look at this. This is one of the things that must be introduced and practiced among our people. Number one, coming together seriously in an organized body politic platform. Coming together in propria persona su juris su heritus, which means being yourself. You cannot operate in law, in truth, in jurisprudence and law. You cannot operate truly effectively under the nom de guerre operations such as Negro, Black, Colored, and Indian under the Bureau of Indian Affairs, although limited operations have been taking place under the so-called Bureau of Indian Affairs. You must be in propria persona. You must be in your proper person. This is why you'll see many people who are cognate of these actual operations have been promoting heavily around the country, on the land, around the kingdom, on the land, for our people to nationalize, because we know that a right of claim, and particularly a right of allodial claim, a right of aboriginal claim, cannot be made by someone who is not Aboriginal. And so now you're getting into the issue of what is known as jus sanguinis versus or distinguished from jus soli. So jus sanguinis has a true consanguine connection to the pedigree of true Americans, which we read here in the book. That is the copper complexion people who are the true Americans. And the distinction must be made from the hybrid alien colonial descendants of hybrid Europeans who have been traditionally claiming to be Americans. And understand, that's not putting them down. It's not attacking them. Don't confuse that. It's not that. It's just telling the truth of who is who and who is not who they've been claiming to be. However, understanding and knowing that the reason that the hybrid Europeans have been trained to call themselves Americans because they have been making claims on the land and the resources under the doctrine of discovery, which many of you will find many of the court cases by which they've been stealing people's lands. They have won under the rule of the doctrine of discovery, not because they had a legitimate claim. They've been ruled to be claimants valid under the doctrine of discovery. And then when our people are discussing these things, they're trained to start talking racism and prejudice, which means they're already off the mark. Again, why this discussion of Aboriginal titles. And keep in mind, Aboriginal title is first claim. First people, first claim, and right of claim. And if this is again in law, for those of you who already know it, and you see some people around the kingdom that have been talking about right of claim, and they'll make claims on the land or titles, etc., is based on their knowledge of what we're talking about right now. However, if a hybrid has no right of claim. This is why they use mortgages and deeds to claim the land. But knowing that most people don't know that these are false documents, totally false, totally fraudulent documents, and they do not supersede Aboriginal title. This must be known to you. So write this down so you can get this very clear. So as we go on into these things, maybe even in the future, in more refined argument, know this in law and in international law. Aboriginal title is a superior claim to all deeds and other instruments that are used in bodies politics on claims of land and estates. Keep that in mind. So understand, mortgages and deeds are actually fraudulent and are created to create debt under feudal law. Aboriginal title dismisses all that BS because it's BS. It was always BS because whenever you're talking mortgages and deeds, remember, you're immediately talking feudal law operations of hybrid foreign European colonists and their descendants. You're not talking Aboriginal anything. You're talking occupation, operations under colonial executions of Doctrine of Discovery and Unam Sanctum. Those operations, by right of law, do not apply to Aboriginal people. However, under false pretenses, many of you know as 14th Amendment operations, that's one of the tricks that have been used to impose the feudal law operations, avoided inheritance upon Aboriginal people. And this is why you have seen so-called assigned Black leaders promoting 14th Amendment Negro platforms, which declares the people as corpse or dead under corporation, and therefore not heritable in law. And of course, that's been used traditionally, also known as 14th Amendment, which rightfully and historically does not apply to our people whatsoever. But because they've attached to it and claimed to be a part of it in order to try to have some substance of life and some kind of substance of economics, not knowing that they're abandoning their estates, and that platform of the 14th Amendment for the Constitution for the United States, etc., was actually used to steal their land and their estates under the rule of escheating. Again, why it's important for us to look at Aboriginal titles as your rightful and most effective remedy, knowing that there's going to be opposition, because that's the ball of wax, because you start exercising that and you start getting these people across the land to start exercising their right of claim, Aboriginal title, ball game over. However, if they can keep the people distracted, beating around the bush, going into the wrong courts, etc., to municipal courts, etc., which were actually put in place to steal their estates. It's almost like a contradiction. And so our people are not aware of their responsibility to themselves and to their progeny to enforce the treaties, etc., and then make their Aboriginal claims, i.e., because the Constitution for the United States is put in place to keep the foreign Europeans who've been doing business on our land, keep them in check and keep them reminded of their obligations to all treaties in force and to the principles undergirding or supporting that Constitution, all of which comes from honesty or Aboriginal law, etc., and logically the treaties. So again, as a countermeasure to the negative activities that are taking place now, and which have been going on anyway, to tear our families apart, take in consideration and do all your research and be diligent in your research on Aboriginal titles, because it is a rightful and superior claim to all mortgages and deeds. Keep that in mind. So write that down. Aboriginal titles are superior claims and superior right of claims to all and any mortgage or deed. Fact. And put that in quotes. Ingrain that in your mind. Teach it to your family members. Teach it to your children. And expect opposition, because that's the ball of wax. Any other questions, Doctor?
Let me see. What is the language, Lakar Infinite says, what is the language we should be speaking in reference to right terminology? Does any Moor have a book on the way a Moor should speak?
Yeah, keep in mind, let's get this clear from the beginning. Most of the Moors here in North America speak one language, which is mixed international trade language, which you know is English. Understand that English is a Moorish language. It's not the hybrids. It belongs to you. It's actually Creole. What you call English is really Creole. and it was evolved from Phoenicians, etc., which they also called the Gullah, etc., because we were the river people, and we've been trading for millennia, for centuries. And so English is a conglomeration of Moorish Latin and many of your other African linguistic forms, French, German, etc., which are actually African languages. And the people, most people think that those Pictic language, because they're Pictic and More and Dob, etc. And the first thing comes into the people's minds are the hybrid Europeans because of their having control of these areas, or of the peninsula, Iberian Peninsula. So if you, and Phoenicia. So if we say to most of these Asiatic Africans now, tell us about the history and tell us about the geographics of Iberia and Phoenicia. And most of them would start looking at a map in Southern or South Asia, which we call Africa now, and they'd be looking, trying to find Phoenicia, etc., and not knowing that Phoenicia is Europe. That's fact. Phoenicia is Europe. Iberia is the European peninsula, which you call Portugal, España, Española, Italia, which you already know as in the area that you call Spain, which is Al-Andalus. That's North Africa, northern part of South Africa. It's the truth.
I think what the questioner is asking is more to do with not so much dialectic, but what's the right type of how. This is
where I think the question follows. This is where the question follows is more harmonic with what are the legal terms and law terms that have been used to steal our state, and should we be familiar with them? Yes, you should.
I mean, just the thing of as cheating.
As
right
cheating.
There, you hear cheat in there, and I'm thinking, how obvious is? I'm glad you like it.
Keep in mind,
how obvious is something that says there is cheating your property?
Exactly. Like for instance, like let's look at this. Like say for instance, like say we can go around the corner here in Wilmington, in area, in the Nanacoke area of the Nanacoke Moors. This area is Nanakoki. This is us. Nanakoki is the Moors of this area. And they'll falsely call us in history like Delaware Indians and stuff. No, Nanacoke. All right, so the Nanakoki of this area, we can go in this area right now that's under hybrid European operations of the Wilmington Corporation, which is a corporation, not the land. People need to understand this. These are political zones or jurisdictions that are created under corporate activity and placed on the land. These are zones for taxing. And I know that our people really need to be aware that, like, say, for instance, this building here, right? And there's a number that's on the face of this building. And they will deceive you into saying that this number is your house. No, it's not. That number is a designation in a logbook for tax collection. That's the only purpose it serves. It has no other purpose whatsoever. You attach yourself to it, then they call you taxpayer. Now that's feudal law. You don't rebuke that, right? Mm-hmm. Then they put what you call force, because on the feudal law, they force you. There is no such thing as voluntary nothing. They rob you, extort you, and if you don't take it, they'll take the house, say that the house is theirs, and they're lying. But that's called as cheating. Now they've been doing that since 1913. See, but people have lost cognizance because, how many generations have they dissolved since 1913, whereas there's no reference point. And so many of our people and my family included, right,
Mhm.
are struggling for so-called job somewhere to live or to try to support their families so that their families can eat and be out of the weather, and can give you stories where grandmother had untold acres of land, whether Virginia, Jersey area, what we call, Shakamakson or Shakyabi area, which they'll call Jersey, right? New Amsterdam, which they'll call New York. And we all have that history. How many of our people never dawned on them that the land was stolen from your families through the creation of the mortgages and deeds that were placed on them since 1913? Because most of us can trace the loss of family land within the last couple generations. And that's a fact. But it never dawns on them of how it was done to them, how it never dawns on them that they were cheated. They'll say, oh, my grandmom had land and we had a farm and all this stuff, and the children lost it for taxes, not knowing that tax never applied to them. And that the right that inherited land was not to be taxed. But they misclassified the land, and then misclassified themselves, claimed to be Americans, and then taxed the land, knowing that the people, after a couple of generations, couldn't keep up with it. They just used what they call inflation to do it. And so they need a couple of generations. They already know that the tax would come a dead pledge, what known as a mortgage, an implied debt, all built on a fraud, and then the people can't pay the debt, and then they take the land. This is what they've been doing. This is exactly what they've been doing. That's what a cheat is. You see? Mm-hmm. And a cheat is essentially an estate. It's an obstruction of the natural process of inheritance. Keep this in mind. Escheat, this is what me and Dr. Niall was just making reference to. Escheat is an obstruction of the natural course of inheritance. And this is also how they've been gentrifying our communities over the years. And because of the younger generations, thereafter, lost reference, they didn't know that these things were being done. Because in their mind, they've been trained that they owe taxes to the foreign alien Europeans who were being claimed to be Americans, not knowing that they were actually being attacked. But this is a result of lack of information. And of course, this is why Gates Foundation set up the General Education Board to dumb these people down. And then generationally steal their estates. And now our people are pretty much subjugated. So now they can control the jobs, and so make sure that the men can't properly take care of their families. Then they use that and then pit the women against the men, which completes the cycle of the genocide. And this is why you see much of what you call these broken relationships that you're experiencing now in society. And the people are thinking they're mad at each other. Oh, he cheated. Oh, she cheated. Oh, no, they're trying to survive. And they're being groomed to that. And even whether they use the music platform to influence the youth, the dress codes to influence them, etc. All of this is part of the Unam Sanctum Doctrine of Discovery is cheat operations. And that's the truth. And you can't make people know. What you can do is share with them information, trusting that they are interested enough or loving enough, because we've been trained also not to love each other.
Well, somebody was asking about whether or not the person was asking about language, and then they clarified and wanted to know if anyone had done a book. And I pulled out here.
Also, you have more information here.
Yes.
Give more information. Now,
that book is going to help them.
I'm going to share with you all 2 books that all persons who would like to have a foundation in grammatication, a foundation in etymology, a foundation of the proper jurisprudence phrases that are applied to us, and also some of which have been used to escheat you. Here's one: Etymology and Vocabulary by Abdullah Iltalib Mosi Bey.
Yeah. A little bit more further over. A little bit. Yeah, there you go. Right there. There you go.
That's the front. And this is the back. And as you can see, take a screenshot, because you can order it right down here. And if you want to have a really grounded knowledge of the true politics of the West and the world, and your history and jurisprudence, and of treaties and constitutional principles, Moors and Masonry, by Abdullah Iltalib Mosi Bey. And of course, those of you who want to acquire this book, you can get it on more civil letter. And he has many other books that will show you the culture and the history and some jurisprudence established in fact. Then you have the Masonic, Compass and the Square, Measurement and Timekeeping. By Abdullah Iltalib Mosi Bey. So the curriculum is there for you. Here's Moorish Mystery. Mysticism.
Jamal.
Africa. Moorish Dominions. And we have a lot of other literature. And of course, those are by Jamal. Yeah. And these other last two are by Jamal. Now, point that I'm making to you, you have a lot of professors and scholars among your own. However, they have to publish in what you call in our own venues, because mainstream controlled media under the Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation is not going to give you this kind of information. No, they're not. Don't expect it. However, these are Aboriginal books by Aboriginal people with the true knowledge and the view of the world from the eyes of an Aboriginal, distinguished from an occupier or descendant of occupiers who are here to asking you to hold up the vocabulary of the first book. Yes, to extort or, escheat your land. And everybody should have this for their children. But that includes adults. And adults will quickly find out how much they've been miseducated. It's shamefully. So when we share information with you, we have professors among our body's politics who are more than highly qualified, to produce curriculum for you. And this is great for all homeschoolers. And of course, it's going to lead you to other writings by Professor Abdullah. It is, to be blunt, priceless. To be bluntly truthful with you. And it is sort of like, get back on your experience of loving philology, or loving books, loving to read, loving to study. Because knowledge is power. And those who logically don't want you to know that you're Aboriginal would promote ideas and statements and principles that imply, like as an example, a book like this says, see this? Black people are dead in law, so restore your citizenship. This is by the author Issa Rael, as an example.
You get that from Sister Cynthia Martinell. Buy this book. I'm going to put this on buythisbook.com.
So there's literature. There's much literature coming from Moors to bring remedy to our people. Invest in yourselves and invest in learning what's really going on. And again, because things are moving so quickly in the political economic world today, it's almost like things are changing by the day. So, how do you say? It's sort of like you're in a knife fight and people are talking about how many bandages you got. It's better to have some bandages anyway than none at all. And because a lot of this information should have been known and should have been with you from childhood. We must realize that we've been handicapped. However, if you're breathing, you can still achieve, a higher degree of knowledge by actually studying, in fact, reality and things that are going on in the real political world. So the economic problems that are plaguing our communities, which have been tagged with the nom de guerre, Black and people of color, those are tags. Those are nom de guerre. Write that down too. Nom de guerre. And you got to be familiar with the real true designations that have been falsely promoted as identifications. They are really designations. They're political designations that actually set forth in political operations that such persons are dead in the view of law. And that's a fact. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. They're actually war names. It's called pseudonyms, but they're also referred to as war names. So when they're calling you Negro, Black, and colored and people of color, it's actually an attack. But people who can't read don't recognize it, that it's an attack. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
And people want to carry, that Black title around like it's some badge of honor.
That's why it's promoted. It's promoted to rebury them. See, like a scholar would know, like say, for instance, when as the George Soros Foundation set up the Black Lives Matter program operations, right? The surface appearance for people who can't read think that it's put there to help us or to help our people because they've been trained to call themselves that tag and they think that's a helping hand. No, it's designed to rebury the people because they recognize that there's a movement on the land where the people are becoming conscious. And even though they've put a lot of effort to suppress information and to misrepresent information and also even mock and make fun of the knowledge, the true pedigree of the people who don't know, who can't read, think that they're addressing, or they set up this organization with billions of dollars to help our people. It's a reburial. And then I'll tell you this. If people would remove emotions, right, and just observe, meaning that if they would detach themselves and observe and just take note, they'll notice that everywhere where they put people out in the name of peaceful protest, they're tearing up things and burning things and shooting people and hurting people. And most of the people that are doing it are hybrid pale-faced Europeans. Some call them Antifa and other things like that. And the platform was created for that purpose, not really to help the people. If you pay attention, most of the places where they tore up in the name of peaceful protest, aren't they so-called tag Black communities?
Mm-hmm.
So now, the little bit of stores they did have, they tore them up.
But the people that have come in
from outside
are outsiders. Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, the perpetrators are largely. If you look at those videos of that,
the issue is they're seizing the emotion side of our people being abused, implying that they're helping our people when they're actually burying them. And it's, again, even like I was talking to a brother, I think a week and a half ago or something like that. Yeah, a week and a half ago on 52nd Street. And he was talking about Black, as a consanguine identity. And I took him to a dictionary and showed him Black means pale colors. White spot, that's what Black means. And you know how many of our people who are alleged to be caring for our people will teach their children that Black means African identity. And that's a term of endearment, etc. It means white spot and it means pale colors. It's nothing wrong with the word Black. However, it's a word that's put in place to escheat the people's estates. And because no one goes into the Unam Sanctum operations, for people who don't know the history, it never dawns on them that this was in place to steal their estates, to escheat their estates. Again, it's why this is a subject matter, about allodial titles and Aboriginal titles, because the Aboriginal title is superior. Logically, one must be in the consanguine connection with the Aboriginal right of claim to make that claim. This is where nationalization comes in.
I know there's someone on here that wanted you to expound on decolonization, but I wanted to say to
decolonization.
But I also wanted to say that you like last month you did an actually whole program on that.
Oh yeah.
So they need to go back and watch that video.
Yeah, well, mention that so they can go back to that.
They just go back on our site.
Yes, because all of nationalization itself is part of decolonization.
You were saying that.
All the information shared now is a part of decolonization. Consciousness of your pedigree and consanguinity is denationalization. Is nationalization. I apologize. And the absence of that knowledge and the suppression of that knowledge is denationalization, which is what has been taking place, which has much to do with the support foundation of the existing conditions that the people have been falsely encouraged to call racism and prejudice, which is a total diversion, and it is a mind control operations dealing with taxidermy, etc., set up by the naturalist Frederick Blumenbach, etc., Johann Frederick Blumenbach, etc., Carlos Linnaeus, etc. And this is, in your 1700s, and has been used as a foundation of prototypical explanation of human evolution on the planet. It's totally contemporary, and of course, been used as a weapon by colonial operators in the Western Hemisphere. This is why you will always see them always relentlessly bring up racism and prejudice, race and prejudice, to ingrain it into people's mind. And it never dawns on the people that this prototypical operations by Carlos Linnaeus, etc., the 1700s, that is used as a weapon for schism operations, particularly by British, by English hybrid Europeans under Unam Sanctum operations, Doctrine of Discovery, the Crusade operations under the Spanish Inquisition, manifesting as Western Hemisphere colonial occupation, is a weaponized system to achieve the necessary escheat operations to claim the land. This is also why they fervently keep claiming to be Americans. It is a political strategy, and that must be understood. It has nothing to do with truth. It has nothing to do with honor. is absolutely war operations, and it's a political strategy. That's why we have to keep reminding our people, stop calling the pale-faced hybrid Europeans Americans. They're not Americans. Don't be mad at them. It's just, they're just thieves. They steal people's lands and the resources. However, you're suffering because of it. Your families are poor because of it. Your people are packed into concentration camps. They'll call them city and state jails and prisons. They are concentration camps. Got broken families. Concentration camps. Margaret Sanger operations for the genociding of the people off the land so they could claim the land.
The Democratic vice presidential candidate is on record as having not wanted to release the early release in California and Khalifa territory because it would reduce the in-prison workforce population.
Exactly, because it's connotative, but it's slavery.
Yeah.
And he also called them roaches, called the children roaches.
Well, I'm talking about the vice presidential.
Candidate called Biden, called the children roaches.
No. When I said California, I'm talking about Kamala Harris.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about roaches.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I'm talking about phrases, statements that he has made.
That happened 4 blocks from here in the pool where he used to work right around here, where he said he liked to have the children play with the hair on his legs and the roaches. But people don't hear that. Like that thing I sent you. They said we don't care about what he did.
Yeah. But you already know, and I know, that he's running as CEO for the United States Corporation Company. It's not the country. And this is back to even some of the things that we've read here, concepts. People are still under the misinformation that the United States is a country. The United States is a private corporation under international law occupation of the Western Hemisphere. See, so if some of these things aren't, sitting with you in your knowledge base, you come off a false foundation and logically have false expectations, which is, again, why people keep getting frustrated with the voting process. They keep voting for change. Yeah, they do get changed. They get poorer. Their families are more broken. It's not your country. It's a corporation occupying your country. Country is Morocco.
Here's an observation I made. A lot of times we will look at other countries like, Panama or some other country, someplace.
Same thing.
We'll say these places, it's a shame they're under occupation, not realizing that we too.
Well, first.
Right.
Which is why you forgot you're under
occupation. We look out and see everybody else under occupation except us.
Yeah.
We think we're free.
That's part of the Gates Foundation training. There you go. So we know that, this we didn't get in this condition overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. However, for whatever good that we can do to help the people, for them to become active, starts to dismantle the mind control systems that they're suffering from. The major issue, another issue is, the more active we are, the less likely the next generation buys into the false platforms that we ourselves have been nurturing under ignorance, because we will stop practicing them. Because remember, the strength of fiat operations is the blind faith maintenance. It is meaning that the blind faith, are people thinking that this misinformation is not damaging, it's just a matter of somebody's opinion. But they just sacrifice the next generation. But they don't see that they've done it. And they have not taken responsibility that they themselves have done it. It's sort of like an enemy giving you arsenic and you feeding it to your children, and you say, they did this to my babies. Yes, with your help. As an example, convincing women that they're helping women. So once you want your breasts to be nice and shapely and Weibelfetzered and everything, don't let your baby suck on those things. And so now your babies don't have their immune system together. Now they'll come stick them with viruses, actually plant them with nanoviruses and mercury and other poisons that create disease later.
On. Yeah, that's why they would say
when the mother's milk is the true builder of the immune system.
But that's all they would say. I heard last year, I noticed last year, in the last couple of years, they had a commercial, and it says 1 out of 4 people born between 1945 and 1955 may have I think it was hepatitis C and be unaware. Now I'm born in 1955, so one of the things I was saying, the only way they could say
they
that
gave it to you
because that's a 10-year period.
They gave it to them.
That in
yes. Even
vaccine.
with the so-called polio vaccine, they were giving the people hepatitis.
Right.
You know.
But another thing I wanted to say, as it comes to being colonized and under occupation, if the colonizers maybe had slanted eyes, or back then, remember Japan was here or some other. If the colonizers didn't look like the ones that we started to sympathize with, we would realize we were under occupation.
Yeah.
But we have been indoctrinated to working side by side, with the Albion, even though because we worked side by side with them when they were the white cargo. But anyway, so-called, we don't see them as that. We don't see that those who we were bringing up have somehow found a way to get an advantage over us and take over our. So
now you're looking at So for those of you who need some reference in history,
like if
going to Germany,
here, if we looked around in every place you saw Korean soldiers and whatever, we'd be like, we're under occupation.
Yeah.
But because we don't see, they don't look different.
The training
has
the
given
training
us
that
blinders to see.
It's sort of like the blinder is the misinformation.
Yeah.
Of them claiming to be Americans for generations and getting our people to call them Americans, and after a while they start saying, "Oh, they're Americans. They just have lighter complexion." Duh.
They don't realize when Hitler so-called fell, when we don't believe he did the way they think. These guys came over here. They didn't just come over here and start NASA. They came over here and did a whole lot of stuff that we think is American.
Yeah.
They started occupying this place. They changed names. Their names changed.
Let's set up another fact.
Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct. Let's set up another fact for those, since you brought that up. The average people here are being educated under the Gates Foundation that Germany under Hitler lost the war. The fact of it is they did not. As a matter of fact, NASA is dominated by the scientists from Germany who kicked U.S. corporations, our Sinskers. And the real deal of it is, this is why, as a matter of fact, the SS or the Social Security platform and all that stuff came from the SS. NASA is Nazi. It is. Now, it's not a condemnation, it's just a fact. That's why we read when you talk about the CIA, all the FCC, and NASA, all of them are foreign entities occupying the land. They're not constitutional. They're not constitutional creatures at all. But I mean, it's a known fact.
Not by all, by some.
It's a known. You know how people know facts? Let's put it this way. How many people know the fact that Santa Claus is not real? How many people go in debt for sometimes years to support Santa Claus operations? How many people sacrifice things that their family needs to celebrate Santa Claus operations, and as a tradition doing it? Not that they should or shouldn't. I mean, we're not arguing about whether they should or shouldn't. We're talking about their dedicated mind into it. It is no different than people, and I'm saying that to say this. Do people know Santa Claus is not real? Fact. And this is back to what we were saying earlier. Upon any examination, any minor resource, the people know that the United States is a private corporation. They don't want to acknowledge it because they've been part of the fraud, promoting it against their own children and encouraging their children to be a part of it while their children continually being injured. And then calling the injury racism and prejudice, which is not only a fraud, it's severely irresponsible. It's almost like on another level of people being so busy being a fraud and not expecting for it to have a very damaging consequence. And when the chickens come home to roost, and we're suffering the consequences now, saying things like, the white man did this to us, and then even blame their own land. America did this. They not only not knowing, they're making dumb, ignorant, and invalid statements from an emotional perspective that actually pushes the guilt off of those who are responsible, and then allows them to hide behind their LLCs, which is the mask of corporate entity, and they call the person. You punch them and they're arguing with the corporation. And you know, the city of Wilmington sent me, city of Wilmington never sent you nothing. Can't breathe, can't think, can't move, can't act. Is some man or woman using that platform 90% of the times to rob you, not to support you, not to do anything good for you, to rob you. And that goes for all of these other entities. Now, that's the truth. And people don't want to take the responsibility to start looking at this and start recognize that they've been misclassified so that the Unam Sanctum Doctrine of Discovery operation can take place. Whereas the Aboriginal title would have been the fence, and it is the fence to block such activities that have been, how do you say, initiated since 1913 and has pretty much decimated our communities. And rather than take responsibility and tell the truth about what's really going on, they'll start talking about racism and prejudice and Black Lives Matter and start marching around the place. Fraud on top of fraud on top of fraud. And of course, the outcome is what? Is it beneficial? Is it progressive? It is totally destructive. Now, that's a fact. However, for those who are willing to use their divine mind and really have some desire to help the following generations, and while you're at it, help yourself too, start talking about Aboriginal titles and do all research concerning Aboriginal titles. You're going to be shocked what you learn, and you're going to be shocked to learn what your so-called Black leaders haven't been telling you. You think they love you and they want to help you. Maybe you can keep thinking it if you want to. However, the real problem we have is that while we're BSing around, we're getting to the point that we'll have no access to resources to counter any of this and will be totally expendable. Because from the political platform, they're already expendable. From the activity, the extinction operations and genocide operations has already been activated. However, to the point of no return is what our people should be concerned of. You know how they say when you sit down too long while they're beating your ass, and after a while you don't have the strength to fight back at all, and you have no option of recourse. Meaning that while divine allows you some breathing and some opportunity of recourse, it would be wise if you stop being passive and start learning something. I mean, real substance, not opinion, but facts about what's going on. And among other things, Aboriginal title should be on the subject of all melanated people's minds, i.e., copper-colored people who are the Americans. Distinguished from the Paleolith hybrid Europeans who have been operating on American soil for the last couple centuries under Doctrine of Discovery and the Spanish Inquisition operations. Now, that's a fact, not an opinion. Anything else?
Let me say, let me see. Somebody here wants to know if you, one they want you to come and speak in Bermuda.
Huh?
If you can go look on a boat, I know you're not going to fly. Bermuda. Vatican Royals.
Let me read another one here to share with the people. And remember, the House in the future, she'll make those determinations. We'll get some of these printed up. It's about 3 pages.
Do you have it on a document that we can turn into a PDF?
Huh?
Is it on in a computer? Or?
I have it on one of my computers. I have about 4 or 5 computers. I go on my old stuff. I'll find it. But basically,
it's what is all natural public notice. All natural people and citizens should be aware of these facts. Know that the following are laws and issues applicable at North America via the United States.
And they can take a screenshot of this if they can, and just for starters.
You need to move it over and then hold it up a little bit right there. So I don't know if they can. It's not clear.
I know, but you already know they could. We'll just start saying it to them. Matter of fact, we'll get this together and add this to the flash drive.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Add it to the flash drive.
All right.
Because it's very important. And let me see. No, this is again, and this is for those who have been affected or infected by persons and trolls who have been discouraging you in relationship to national venues for proper jurisprudence known as consular court. This would be a counter to those troll activities. Number 9, there have not been any lawful judges within the jurisdiction of the United States Corporation doing business at North America since 1789. There have just been arbitrators and administrators. Now that's a fact. Reference. FRC GE 281 US 461 Keller versus PE 261 US 428 First Statute 138 178. There are no lawful judges been operating on this land since 1789. So you can understand again why those who are helping to misinform the people keep telling them to march around and pray. What are they marching and praying for? The restoration of the courts, the legitimate courts? Do they know that there's no due process for us because there are no legitimate courts? Why don't they tell them the truth? Of course, now you understand that these people who have been attacking our people in the name of law are not law officers at all, but commercial mercenaries. And then they get mad because we tell you the truth. And people who don't know have false expectations of them. Why are they beating that poor woman? Why'd they snatch that woman out the car? These men, and they're beating her down to the ground because her tail light was out. That's police brutality. No, it isn't. It's commercial military operations under Unam Sanctum and Doctrine of Discovery. Get over it. Now, if you intend to do something about it, now talk. If you're not, stop the bull.
As far as these bases, Grand Sheik, can you speak on how Moors can demonstrate on the land Al Mubarak?
Easily. Start being yourself. and teach others to be themselves and not be phony about it. It's not a belief. It's not a religion. It's a consanguine birthright issue.
Here's another one. Khalifa basis. How can we be Americans when this land wasn't even called America? Al Morocco.
Amexum. It is.
Americans are really Al Morocco, American, whatever that is, are really the Europeans. We can't be something that the Europeans made up.
Now, aren't we the real Europeans? You see how the misinformation? We are. You see now. So now, ancient and modern Britons. Go get the book, Ancient and Modern Britons, David McRitchie, and learn your Moorish history, because you're the real Europeans. Get over it. You see how they steal your identity and then make you deny your estate. See how clever that is? Even a lot of so-called Black scholars promote that fraud. So the next generation, having no reference, buy into it, not knowing that that's what? MK Ultra mind control operations with connotative linguistics under the international education programming.
Here's one. Bustamante Ribas says, I totally support as a Latino Black girl. I'm tired of racism not being able to get ahead.
Number one, you're not Latino. That's a tag they put on us. You're a Moro. And you already know, sis, sometimes they call you Moreno, Morena. They know you're Moors. Latino is another tag they put on Moors, etc., who spoke Moorish Latin. That's a language. It's not your identity. You're Moor. Get over it.
Let me see. I'm going up there. Everything more or less. I'm just trying to find comments and questions that you might want to. Okay, CN says, why does the Unam Sanctum document have power? I don't understand why they had to use a UDD in the first place.
Let's look at it this way. How many of our people say, today after tomorrow, right? So today, right? This day, fria, right? We'll go to so-called religious institutions from Friday to Saturday to Sunday and pack these institutions in the name of Constantine, Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed, and then claim it to be Christians and support it physically, emotionally, and economically, and then charge one they call Jesus with it, who had nothing to do with it, and support the platform that was put in place to actually conquer them. Then ask that question again. Meaning that we keep sanctioning the institutions that were put in place to destroy us. As an example, fact, not secret. The Black Code 1724 used to destroy and to target our people and to divide the women against the men, in fact, with a structured format of instructions, came directly from the church. And how many of our people have been supporting the church, i.e., that they thought was the church, because it ain't Coptic. Keep that in mind. It's Constantinian. And then wonder why we so messed up now. And then most of them are run by overseers that are secret and in some ways semi-secret perverts. And anyway, and con artists, opportunists. For all the billions of fiat designated as money that has been supporting these institutions for generations, show in fact what economic benefit that any of these communities have from any of those institutions, any of them. Show the record, not opinion. Show it for the record. And you'll have a handful of people that work through some of these institutions that set up some businesses here and there that can be marked as they got something out of it. But for the most part, all these people are in the communities buried with mortgages and debt for generations for these beautiful buildings in dilapidated communities with no accountability of the millions and millions and millions that are contributed to the kind artists running them by the year. So let's not get into decades and generations.
I actually have this Christian Black codes. If you want me to bring it up.
Yeah, it's not a secret. It came right from the church. As a matter of fact, read number 6 as an interest, as a point.
Let me see if I can share it. Oops, where is it? Some people hate the truth. Okay, let me get the right one. Trying to bring it up.
Yeah.
That's the wrong one. Stop sharing. Share. That's not it.
Now, number 11. This is the House report. New York City is defined in federal regulations as, quote unquote, the United Nations. How many of you knew that?
What was that?
I'm repeating. New York City is defined in federal regulations as, quote unquote, the United Nations. How many of you knew that? I'm just showing you some of the basic stuff.
They call it the Empire
Of course.
State.
Because you've been conquered. United Nations is what? IMF.
The Monetary Fund?
Yes. Why do you think they put fiat and told the people it was money? You've been robbed and they gave you fiat. Now the carcass is almost, that's exactly correct. Now if you understand this, you even know why they dropped them buildings. Most people don't know those buildings, those towers that they dropped in New York had a tunnel underground that led directly to the Federal Reserve. And that while they tell people a lot of things, they tell, well, some guy, it was this cave, you understand, in Afghanistan. And this guy had a box knife, a magical box knife that he found. And he made those buildings fall down. For real. And everybody, yeah, whoa. Well, he must be a devil. And they really believe that. But you won't hear them talking about when they were doing the debris and they were blocking off and why they start removing the debris without any yellow tape and telling them that it's a crime scene, and why all the columns of them buildings were on a 45-degree angle. They didn't break off. They were all on a 45-degree angle, which means those buildings were dropped. Yes. And about one of the trucks that when the building collapsed, one of the buildings collapsed, trapped one of the trucks in the tunnel, happened to be filled with German gold.
I've been in the one of the towers, and I came in from New Jersey, and the tunnels underneath the train or the subway or whatever train rode right up to, and we got off the train and went up the escalator, and we were on the ground floor of the building. Yeah. So it ran through. So there definitely was tunnels.
Yes, but they ain't the only ones. See, the deal, we're not talking about the trains. We're talking about other tunnels.
There was, I'm saying it already had a whole underground something.
Yeah, just so like, for instance, like for instance, you can go at Philadelphia, Shakamoxon area, right? Philadelphia, right? And around the 30th Street, that whole area around there, most people don't even know that there are tunnel streets under there that city workers, because I've been through some of them, even with city workers, miles, and you never know that while you're riding up Market Street, across Schuylkill Bridge, and all these places,
There's a life
that
underneath.
right underneath it, and we're not talking about necessarily far space. We're talking about blocks where you run a block and turn, but they're very narrow because they're concrete. They're, and it's like, literal tunnels. And you can go across on to the South Philly in a tunnel, go north, go somewhere west, north, and honeycombed all through there, even to the waterfront where some of them are blocked off, apparently. And that's the truth. Our people's concepts about the politics here on this land is really has been corrupted. And really, we need to be awakened to a lot of information that has been held back.
Khalifa Bey is asking, where did you get the information saying that we are Europeans? Yeah, I know you gave the book reference, though.
Yeah, it's not just that. Now, let me give you something else to go with. Tell her, go look up the history of Phoenicia and Iberia, which now would be called Europe. Look into the coat of arms of the ancient European families, and I guarantee you that you will not find any pale faces. That's number one. Number two, look up the information of Europe, which is Phoenicia. Look up the Picts, the Dubs, and the Moors. And the real Europeans are Africans. The hybrid Europeans start taking over. In reference to the political venues of the modern world, look up King Charles III and look at the politics after his death, and you'll start seeing the transfer of power from the Picts and the Dubs into the hands of the hybrid Europeans that you assume are the true Europeans today. Go do some research. Don't be afraid of books. Don't buy them $200 sneaks. Buy them $35 and $40 sneaks and spend the rest on some books and do some research and answer your own question. And also, being a woman, how many children will be saved?
Where it now, okay, Christopher Creer, I'm going to read this question. Where it now sets twice, where it now rises. Can you explain this in today's unrest? I don't know that. Where it now sets twice, where it now rises. Can you explain?
I don't understand the question.
I don't know what that is. It must be a quote from something.
Yeah, but you gotta put it in context.
Everybody assumes you know everything.
Oh, please. They're talking about where the sun never rises or sets.
I don't know.
It had to be.
Christopher Creer, could you tell us where that comes from?
Put it in context. See, because it is ambiguous.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's not just for me; it's for the listeners.
And this question, I think, was one of the questions I saw the other day when I had Brother Lamont on, and I don't think I got to it. I saw it, but it kind of went by. And with someone like there's someone here mentioning Jamaica. People, brethren that are in like Jamaica and the islands and so forth, they want to know what they should be doing from us. Do they have to nationalize through the all
right, now we're talking. Remember now,
because I think we've had this question.
Let's look at this. Remember, last month I think when we did the issue on understanding jurisdictions, and this is back to the same principle. What has been the training? Why and how are those questions formulated? What's the mindset that sets that question afloat? It is this: when people from Jamaica Tobago, Trinidad, Boricua, Dominica, Brazil, Argentina, Peru, etc., keep referring to themselves as other than the Americans. They're allowing the fake American that we're talking about to tell them that they're foreigners on their own land. This is back to the point of the fraud. And so you're talking, now go back to the title, Dr. Naila, because this applies to the title.
Okay.
Aboriginal title, because title is also your designation. It both deals with persons and lands and property. See, so when you talking to some of the brothers from the islands, they're not thinking in their mind that they're Ghanaian and Phoenician and Bantu. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand that you're in South Africa. South Africa is America. In the West, it's America. That's the distinction of Africa of the West. This is why, like when you hear, when you start going into political statements and records in the, say, in the early 1900s and more prevalent in the 1800s and the 1700s, they always refer to America as Egypt of the West.
And that's why somebody was telling me that just recently that the soil samples on the so-called east coast of the U.S. are very much like some of the
Not very much, they're identical.
Same soil that are on the west coast of Africa.
Not very much. Okay. They are the same soil.
They're the same soil. Yeah, they're the same soil.
You see, it's sort of like, you know, it's sort of like, this is reality. Get over it. We've got to stop. You know, we get into this habit of doing, Dr. Naila, when you really listen to us carefully. We almost keep falling for the position of this promoted idea of tell the truth, so tell it in a manner that you're apologizing for telling the truth. Mm-hmm. You know, it's sort of like similar to, it's almost like no, it's the same damn soil. You know, but it's almost like, you know, this political correctness. We all, you know, we're telling the truth. We know we're stepping on eggs. You know, and it's that psychology. Even that psychology is that people are in the mental. When you listen to people, when they discover stuff and discover things, when they start reading and doing research or going into congressional records or going into old treaties and communications between nations and find out that half of these nation states that they're talking about today didn't even exist then. And then they have to put in parentheses or qualifications so that people know what they're talking about in modern terms. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?
Yes.
Same thing. And so what we keep doing is keep trying to measure George Washington's activities by iPhone standards. No, I'm just saying, whether he had people are arguing whether he had an iPhone or a Samsung. And not understanding, once you set the false premise, everything else is false. Let me give you something about Georgia, y'all.
Yeah, somebody mentioned while you're at it about, and we didn't say anything. We were talking about the buildings that came down. That number 7 wasn't hit, but it went down. So what did 7 have in it?
Records. They had a lot of the records of the derivatives, which are the mortgages and stuff, because there were direct transfers between that building and Deutsche Bank in Germany. And it has a lot to do with a certain foundation that starts with a C that they're investigating right now. Plus, all of those buildings, the insurance policies were doubled on them 2 months before they fell. Now, all these are known facts. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's it. Somebody said it was a big insurance.
But you notice how people they, instead of looking into facts or doing any investigation, they follow whatever the public narrative is in mainstream news. and finding somebody across the other on the other side of the ocean to hate so they could go to war and steal their stuff. And people keep not only supporting it, but believing it when they know in their heart nobody took them buildings down with no damn box knife. You can't even go in there. You can't even go and have them buildings. You can be here.
Well, they were supposedly.
How many New Yorkers? Look, Dr. Nyla. How many New Yorkers, people in New York area, right? Prior to them buildings dropping, that didn't have access to all parts of those buildings without ID and investigation security. Less more somebody getting there with a box knife.
But they didn't come in. They allegedly didn't come in the building with it. They were on the plane, alleged planes, the supposed planes. Because some people said, those were missiles.
Let's put it this way.
There were missiles and CGIs.
Let's put it this way. Hey, you all, anybody who's listening, go back, take your time, look at some of them films where the buildings falling down, where the cameras happen to be strategically focused and steady, set up. They weren't shaking, set up. Yeah. And for those of you who know anything about contracting, I know about contracting because I've been in the business. Those of you know anything about contractors and demolition, I'll say this word, and this is for people who haven't paid attention. Just pay attention to this. Start looking at the films, and this is the word I'm giving to you. Squib. SQUIB. And then ask anybody that knows anything about construction and demolition and say, do you see any squibs? And then watch their mouth drop and watch them start looking and then pointing them out. And the rest of it, you start looking for yourself. I'm not going to tell you anything more. And if you think them planes knock them buildings down, you got another bridge in Bosnatzel Stinkle to sell you.
Simba Uzumaki says, Taj, does the fleur-de-lis have a sort of representation for Moors? I see the fleur-de-lis everywhere. Yes. On European flags.
Yes. It actually belonged. It's actually your stuff. But they also used it as a brand for our people.
Right.
When they burnt brands in our people. But it was also actually one of your coronation principles of ancient Africa that was used in Phoenicia, which is your etc. Among the original Picts and Dubs, who are the original French. That's the truth. Get over it.
I see thumbs up. We never say this, but I want to remind people that if you're watching, please give us thumbs up. And please, please like it, please share, and please subscribe if you're not subscribed. I forget to say that. We have like 900 folks on one thing.
And let me share with you all again, and keep in mind, House of Reawakening Minds. Military dictator George Washington divided up the states, in parentheses, estates, and politically formed them into districts. So all these districts that you're hearing about were set up by George Washington under military operations. And you'll find that in Messages and Papers of the Presidents, Volume 1, page 99, 1828 Dictionary of Estate. How many of you knew that? I know you didn't, because your so-called Negroite leaders are paid not to tell you that. And then they have trolls to come on to tell you, they're making up that stuff, and they made that stuff up. No, this stuff is documented, and your references are there. So the point that I'm making to you, when you begin to understand what you have not been told, that's documented. Your concepts or how you receive and dispense information in these days will absolutely change, because you'll be actually angry at yourself for being so damn dumb. And it has more to do with, the self-examination when you really thought you know, like our people have this thing of, you know, we're really spiritual, you know, because with the hotep of the melanin of the universe, of the cosmos, of the people of Africa and Asia, and we knew this in Queen Nefertiti and we talk all this stuff and don't even know fundamental politics of what's been happening in the contemporary world, and talking trash and talking smack and always losing and talking about how saved we are. We need to get over ourselves, humble ourselves, and start reading a book again. Like for real, for real, for real. Because this stuff is not so much hidden. It's not knowledge that's promoted among conquered people. But other people have this knowledge commonly. Why do you think nobody respects so-called black people? Because we're looked at as boys and girls. Because we operate on that mentality of state of mind. And then we keep calling the foreign aliens who conquered us, keep calling them Americans. You're the American. Get over it.
So Get More Money says, did they try to kill Trump again, or does he really have COVID? What happens if he dies?
On record, they've already tried to assassinate him 26 times. Oh. On record, that's a fact. Now, this is really my opinion. For those of you know about the operations that took place in Fort Detrick, Maryland, with this virus that they call corona, and the mutations of the virus, and it being weaponized, we're not denying that. There's two things that takes place right now. They say corona positive. On one level, with indictments, it implies lethal injection. But on another level, it implies 14-day quarantine where someone's getting out of sight for some other purpose of some other activities taking place, which is what I suspect that's taking place. My thoughts are this, you all. Trump and his family is being put away in protective custody under the guise of corona positive, while indictments are executed and arrests are being made across the country and outside this country.
And weird things are going on. Not just that. I thought, I was talking to a person today, and we were talking about, this might seem off, but we were talking about the news of Chrissy Teigen losing the baby, her and John Legend's baby, and they just conveniently have all of these black and white pictures, and they don't normally publicize stuff like this. Yeah. All of a sudden, you got all these poignant black and white pictures and all this. I'm thinking, we were talking about, why are they doing this?
What's the signal?
It's a signal there, and he's in the
forefront. Always a signal.
John Legend has been in the forefront of a lot. They've been using him a lot through all kinds of stuff throughout this.
Let's look at CGI and other things.
Right, so,
that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, we think it has something to do with something else.
CGI, cloning, and also setting the people up for later news. So that means something's going to come out soon. This is a setup. Something's going to come out soon, and it may not be kind of news that people want to hear. I don't wish it on them, but just put it that way.
Yeah, this is so. Yeah, we just we were talking.
There's going to be a lot of. Put it this way. Trump disappears. Quarantine for 14 days. News is going to bust out later. So that means some other things are in place. And so probably not to the next year, but it's going to come out that, some of these people that they thought were this, that, or the other are not going to be necessarily physically breathing any longer for whatever causes or whatever the root source. We won't speculate. We'll just say it has a lot to do with indictments that have been pretty much locked down for quite some time, but must be executed because of the acceleration of other activities, including the fact that transmissions are being made or finalized in some areas relative to the economic system. The economic system coming in is not de jure. However, it is substitutive, and it is not the system that exists as it is. And some people are going to have to be removed for the purpose of them not interfering. Look at it that way. It's COVID-19 positive. That's what I have to say about that.
Okay, let me see if there's anything. What website? I think so. Yeah, there are a lot of websites showing indictments. Some Mohez P. March. It is the same in England. The BBC, as a medium, is bought out to put out news in a manner that suits its benefactors. There is so much going on in the justice system that is breaking up families. I'm living it. They say they condemn perjury, yet when it is their agents, things are overlooked. Where is
it's
justice?
Not overlooked.
I have knowledge yet without support and a clear direction. How do we create change permanently now, and for good?
Aren't we back to what have we been promoting for the last 5 years or so? The restoration of treaty court venues, which is the pre-existing, already existing venue. You know, it's like this, Dr. Naila, we keep thinking that we got to reinvent the wheel because certain activities haven't been in place, not knowing that the platforms have always been there. We have not been participating. You know, and so when people hear us say consular court restoration, they're thinking that we're talking consular court as a venue within itself, when actually it is an aspect of judicial venue, not the venue. Consular court only exists when there's an issue of diversity of citizenship or diversity of nationality. Other than that, it's silent. You know how it's sort of like the light doesn't come on until you flick the switch? Like say, for instance, if you're, as an example, like you have this light over here to take out shadows, right? And say you had a light that's over here that filters for some other purpose when you're filming, but generally you don't use it. But when certain conditions are on, that's when you switch that on. That's how consular court is. So consular court would essentially be international venue of Article 3 courts, dealing with fundamental laws of the land. Because remember, people have to put it in their mind and understand that when you're talking the supreme law of the land, most people keep thinking constitution by itself. No, supreme law of the land is treaties and constitution. Consular court is when the treaty comes into effect. And so all nationals would be dealing with all controversies under treaty law. Are we clear? That's when the court becomes consular. Outside of that, it's just a judicial venue, you see? It's actually not unlike when you study Muslim law and you study international law of ministry. Like say you'd be a minister in a normal state of affairs, right? And then when it becomes civil, now you are a consular. When that venue is over, you're not. The consular role goes to sleep. Now you're a justice at this point. Now, if you're not trained as a consular, you would, if there's an issue that came before you, then you would be a justice. Then you would say, I have no jurisdiction in this matter. This would have to be moved to a consular court. Okay. You need to understand, and I think a lot of people don't understand, it's a jurisdiction of existing judicial venues. It is not just a court where over here is this court and over here, like they have traffic court, stuff like that, which is a fraud court. People think that, I think for a lack of knowledge, that the court sits like, sort of like you say, oh, go to the fish store or go to McDonald's. That venue is solidly that. Well, consular court is only an adjustment of venue in any legitimate Article 3 court under the condition that a controversy between people of foreign state is presented to that court. Then that court becomes a consular court. However, the lack of its existence leaves the people, victim to municipal courts where it doesn't belong, and they keep getting screwed. This is what's been happening to us. And no one told us that we were in incompetent courts and being taken advantage of. You don't belong in that court.
When I had Brother Lamont on the other day, he said that at one point, the so-called judge or the administrative clerk said to him that you have been appearing here voluntarily. All the times he had come, so they had told him he was coming. He had been coming
because yes,
but he said, "Well, then I'm free to leave. I'm leaving now." He said, "No, you're here now." So when you said that we're not supposed
he's
to
telling you, they know they have no jurisdiction.
It's the same thing was happening, say with the census right now.
Exactly.
They're sending out all of these communications begging you to fill it out. Begging you, they're not saying that, they're telling you all the benefits of it, but they're not telling you.
Hybrid European came to my domicile yesterday. They've been coming for like forever, and I remember it must have been about 17 or 18 of those little white and green slips with numbers on them saying that they were here.
That's me. They sent me.
So
my son went to.
Yesterday I came out. I was and he come run down the street. Oh, because he's talking to the neighbors, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, and started asking me about how many people were upstairs and how many people. I said, "Who are you?" I said, "Clearly European." I said, "First of all, I don't know you. And if you think that I'm going to tell you anything about anything, voluntarily about anything, you're out to lunch. However, since you're here, let me tell you something. Number one, do you know anything about treaty law and constitutional law?" "Well, you know, it's important and the benefits, and we need to know." I said, "First, I'm not a U.S. citizen. I don't agree or consent to be surety for your debt, your foreign debt. So let's get this very clear. Now, if you want to discuss any treaty obligations that you happen to come here standing on my porch for, well, I don't understand, because different people, and my son was telling me some of these. Stop. Why are you going around asking people about what's in their house, who's in their house, when you don't even know the fundamental supreme laws of the land? What does that tell you about you? And what makes you think I'm going to tell you information, and then you're asking me about the people across the street who lives in there? You must be crazy. However, let me give you some information. Go look up the Organic Act of Congress, 1871, February 2nd. Read it very carefully. Look up the civil orders, letter from Pope Francis to Barack H. Obama. Read it carefully. Look at House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session, June 5th of 1933. And if you pass this way again, we'll have another conversation. I know you have to hurry up and go look for some more sureties to back your debt, because I know that they're not buying U.S. bonds anymore around the world, and that all the credit windows and the trade windows of the world have frozen up, and you need to create some more bonds. And I know that you're pretending that you don't know what I'm talking about. I know that you absolutely do. No, I don't kind of know it like you're saying. Have you ever heard of Skull and Bones, Knights Columbus, Knights Templars, or Knights of Columbus, Eastern Stars, P2 Masons? Well, yeah, I heard them. So don't act like these people don't know. And don't you think that I don't think that you know, because you do. But we'll both agree that most of our people don't know. And they are not U.S. citizens. They're not stock. And I know that you need stock. That's why you're desperately running around here continuously, day after day, putting slips in people's doors. Some people think
they need to just fill it out and put more on there.
That is still stupid, because it doesn't apply to you. You need to know what, it's the fact of not even knowing what it is. The census is so they can create more stock. Now, if you want to agree to be surety, because that's what it does when you sign it, you're agreeing to be surety. Now you restock them. And even though the nations of the earth ain't trading with them no more, they do have a legitimate claim of bond. And you are an estate. And you just empowered them. See, it's not only knowing how to sign certain things, contracts, etc., but even knowing what the swell you're signing. And it's back, isn't it back to earlier, as we're saying, Dr. Naila? These people are members of the Roman Curia, of a private corporation that went bankrupt. And they come to you and ask you to sign on as a surety for them in an instrument that they call a census. Do they say that to people when they ask them to sign? No, let's say, have you heard any of these people who've been traveling with these instruments that they're calling census? Have they been telling these people that you're signing up as surety for our debt so we can put our debt against your estate?
Of course not.
Of course they didn't. But I'm just talking about people who have some knowledge keep signing these things and talking about the way they signed them. It's like saying, when they see, Doc, when they gave me the arsenic, I didn't drink it like this. I drink it like this. Duh.
Many people probably have already filled them out, but if they haven't,
well, guess what?
Maybe they'll
guess
do
what?
The right thing based on the knowledge they're getting.
Guess what? It's not what you think it is. Yeah. It isn't what you think it is.
Yeah, they're promoting it. This is how we get benefits and things in your area.
Sure, they do. They get benefits. Yeah. Oh, good. Good. Ask anybody who asked that question, right, Dr. Naila? Mm-hmm. Show the ongoing, running, and documented history where these gentrified communities got a benefit other than gentrification.
I think this person, Rosalind Yaba Ellis, saying peace with love. So why the temples were doing it? I'm pissed. So I guess that they had to tell because they're compromised.
All I would say is this. Look up the FBI papers on infiltration and investigation of the Moorish Science Temple, and then answer your own question. See, truth is uncomfortable, Dr. Naila, and I understand that it is.
Somebody wants to know how do we correct it if we filled out the census.
Well, it's called rebuttal.
Rebuttal?
Rescission of signature and rebuttal. Now, isn't it back to learning to write writs?
Right.
Huh?
Yeah.
Isn't it back to us being active on a political, civic platform? Why is the question asked? Because it is already known that we have no civic platform to make a response or rebut anything. Then we keep signing things, putting ourselves in a hole with no ladder. Well, hell, I was digging this hole for 5 years, and we've been digging this hole forever. And everybody else out there, they're having fun. When you're digging the hole, did you take a ladder down there with you? Well, no, nobody told us. Well, didn't common sense kind of tell you when you dig a hole and dig it over your head, you're going to have difficulty getting out? See, we keep digging holes with no shovel, with no ladders. That's what our problem is, which means we keep signing stuff without understanding contract law. We keep signing instruments without doing research on what that instrument really is. We keep assuming these people are our government when they're a private foreign corporation under occupational international law.
I'm not sure what paper claim means by this, but if they're talking about with regard to the census or just in general, is there a way to correct my ignorance?
Study. That's why we do what we do here at the House of Reawakening Minds, to try to help in mitigating this corrupt condition that exists amongst our people and that has promoted and institutionalized the mental servitude and slavery and peonage that exists in our community. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is what's going to reverse this. When you gain knowledge, you will stop supporting things that injure you. When you gain knowledge, you'll stop sticking your finger in the furnace and saying, how do we stick our finger in the furnace without getting burned? By not sticking your finger in the furnace. How do we stop being surety for the debt of the foreign United States corporation company and our communities keep getting gentrified and they keep stealing our inheritances from our grandmother and the state always takes it under wardship tenure? Stop saying that you're a U.S. citizen. None of which you ever were. Stop volunteering into BS. How come we keep stinking? Because you keep volunteering to be bullshit.
This paper claim says, sure wish I would have had this info months ago. I'm over here signing away like a jackass. Oh, the shame.
Almost.
I don't know. So do you contact the Census Bureau and say, I want to
see this what on such and such. Now, even what they do to you for something that's minor as a record of your phone calls on the phones that people have every day, they got a record of your location, the duration of your conversations, who you talk to, and even the pop-up ads that came up on your phone. So here comes this pale-faced European, and then some persons calling themselves Negroes that come up on your step, knock on your door, and ask you to tell them who's in the house, what their ages is, male or female, and sometimes a little bit more information, and you start running your mouth. And what you did just volunteer yourself as stock and didn't know it because you don't know what a census is, which means you don't sign stuff you don't know. Anything that you sign, quote, everybody listening, please, 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 please. Anything or any instrumentality that you place your autograph on in law all over the world is known as a negotiable instrument. Negotiable instruments can be monetized. Translation, bond. Bond, debt. What else we need to talk about? It's a benefit. Why do you think they spend so much time trying to get you to sign their beneficiary papers? It benefits them.
That's right.
It ain't going to benefit you, I guarantee you that. You must sign this. The law says you must sign yourself as surety to back the United States corporation debt that's registered in Austria that went bankrupt again.
Somebody was asking, and I think I went over it, but they basically were asking, should they protect they have an invention, and I guess they're wanting to know if they should go through the United States.
Are we back to jurisdiction?
Yeah, how they should.
Yeah, but I'm just.
A couple people say trust, put it in your trust.
Well, that's how long we've been telling people that.
Yeah.
Let's go back to this now. Let's go back to this. What they just said, right? Now look at this. Number 14. This is the Senate document 43, 73rd Congress, first session. You own no property under the United States democracy. Slaves cannot own property. Read carefully the deed to the property that you have been duped into thinking is yours. You will note that you are listed as a tenant on the misrepresented documents. Senate document 43, 73rd Congress, first session. You need to know something else? Do you understand what I'm saying, Dr. Naila? We do things by the day, and the simple things that are documented, our people aren't even made aware of. Then we constantly become victims. Then we want to march all over the place like fools and talk about prejudice. Please support the House of Reawakening Minds. Give with Dr. Naila, and those of you, you can send for the flash drives. And what we're going to do, we're going to put this on the flash drive too, and make sure it's updated. And there you go. And get grounded. Yeah, it's like this is like an educational horror story with our people. That these things, these are things, Dr. Naila, is it not true These are things our people deal with every day in their everyday lives and don't even know the foundation of it.
Because these things aren't taught. And then,
Well, good. If they're so spiritual, look at this. Our people always talking about, I'm spiritual and shit. And I was praying, I was talking to the Lord yesterday. I mean, y'all got all this going on. How's this stuff slip? How does stuff keep slipping past you? You march all over the place all the daggone time, raise thousands of fiat and funds, following behind people marching all over the place, asking for a remedy, asking to be recognized, and don't even look at the foundations of the rules of order that you're acting in. Get screwed, get taken advantage of, and then rather than looking at the fraud of it, talk about this racism and prejudice. I want to be a part of this and part of that. And then you selling yourself or volunteering yourself into a jurisdiction in which you do not belong. And then getting upset about the consequence. What we're sharing here is documented, commonly known information among other people. It just hasn't been shared with people who are designated as dead, called Black people and people of color. Why? Because they're not national. So international law and international information is not shared with them because they themselves are the stock. And nobody wants to tell them to the face, you're the stock, you're the surety. We're trying to interrupt these servitude operations that have been inculcated and operative on our land for a couple hundred years. It must be ended, but you can't keep volunteering into servitude and wanting the benefit of allodial activity. They don't go together, they're opposites. You know better, you do better. Now, in reference to those who happen to read the letter, civil orders from Pope Francis to Barack H. Obama, 2014-2015, here we have the Elements of Ecclesiastical Law, Volume 1, Sections 53 to 54, quote unquote, the Pope of Rome can abolish any law in the United States. Why? Because the corporation belongs to the Pope. And so while our people are sitting around talking about, well, for the country, I'm serving my country, signing the census. You just agreed to be their stock. Now you're complaining because you're being abused. Well, what do you think they claimed ownership for? That's Unam Sanctum. That's Unam Sanctum operations. Well, nobody told us. They told you about Jesus and stuff. They told you about the Romans murdering him. How come they didn't tell you this? That the people with hair like lamb's wool, skin like burnished brass, copper-colored people, was being lynched by Romans. Duh. It's sometimes you must imagine how some people look at the people here for the sake or in consideration of some things that are so obvious before even a child have been and are being ignored by adults who are suffering severely. And their families are being destroyed. Their relationships, personal relationships, are dead and being destroyed. And members of the Roman Curia under the foreign military operations called the IRS are robbing them by the day. And they're talking about filling out a census to agree to it. Then asking, well, how do we stop getting screwed? How about first removing the screw, then the screwdriver? Like, duh. We're interesting. Very interesting. Let me give you all another one. Number 17. And this is Pettleford, Fay and Company versus the mayor and aldermen of the city of Savannah, Georgia. And this is 438-520. And this is a court decision. You cannot use the United States Constitution to defend yourself because you're not a party to it. So what happens when these people keep going around talking about their constitutional rights? And then they keep getting screwed. And they're not a part. Was no Negroes, no part of no United States Constitution. Moors were, because it came from honestly Confederation law that you call Iroquois. And it is a designation under treaty operations, whereas it is the foundation for equity and operations for trade and limited jurisdictional operations of foreign Europeans operating at Morocco, i.e. North America. It's an instrument that limits their delegated powers of operation, doesn't give any rights to any damn body. However, in harmony with their constitution, they're obligated to the treaties, which is the supreme law of the land. How come they don't tell you that? Because that's exactly what that means. That means if you're not a party of treaties and international law, you can't use no constitution. That's why they don't have rights, because they keep claiming to be black. Ain't no such people and no such nation made any treaties or international law anywhere on planet Earth, nor some nation with some green or purple flag talking about people of color. Get over the ego and start dealing with intelligence. Honor your mothers and fathers. They are the ones who set up the laws. Then you can enforce the laws of the land. It's called Aboriginal title. It's not opinion, it's a fact. Don't get mad, get wise. Don't get emotional, get wiser.
Here's a question that says, when, wait a minute, it disappeared. It's moving so fast. Listen, conversation on phrases. Good. Who grants?
We'll give you another one. Number 16, Treaty of Versailles, July 16, 1782. Treaty of Peace, 8 Statute, Section 80. The King of England financially backed both sides of the American Revolutionary War. Did you know that? Did they tell you that in school? Then you wonder why your ass is being kicked now. Ask them people that marching you around talking about Black Lives Matter to tell you this. And tell you that not only are you they're wasting your time, they're misdirecting you and putting you in harm's way.
They was asked, how do you buy a house with an allodial title, using the allodial title?
All right. Now, it's called putting in things in context. So if it's an allodial title, what are you buying? And does an allodial right require buying any damn thing? You see how things are put together when people really don't understand? And I accept the question because it's valid. But this is back to day one. You know how like a lot of times when we're talking, Dr. Natalie, and we redundantly go over certain things, and then a year later we'll do the same thing again under another title to come at another angle to tell them, because the truth don't change. The concept hasn't arrived on us. You pay under feudal law. On allodial law or right. It's an inheritance. Inheritance is not taxable. You don't buy your inheritance, and you don't sell it. It is even understanding what you're talking about. It's not a condemnation. Is people don't even understand. Do you But please, you all, go over some of these things that we're telling you and do some reference research. And get with Dr. Naila, and help yourself. Just help yourself, please. Because we can share. We can't make you know. You have to be interested enough in your liberation to do the work and the research that goes along with it, and taking the responsibility and participate in the activities that are necessary on a civic forum to bring remedy to your problems for lack of a state and for the restoration of your estates, and even knowing what your estate is and that you even have one. Because you do, but you didn't know.
I just put a suggestion for you all to check out. I know a lot of you know Karimio. I don't know how to say his whole appellation, but it's Karimio, Ahau on YouTube. He does a lot of historical research. He's like a Dane Calloway on steroids.
Good.
His stuff is 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 hours long. He's got like volumes and volumes of research. So,
and even those who look at Dane, if they just look at the information that he's sharing, right, they would recognize that their concept of how to look at things, that they ain't supposed to be signing no damn census. This is, Dr. Naila, this is where our people really don't know what diversity of nationality is. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. They don't know its function. Put it this way. You know how like some people can have, how many Moors going to the Moor Science Temple got nationalized and don't understand status, and a state goes with it? And if you ask them to start talking about a prayer or belief or chapter of the Quran or the Bible, and be totally off the mark of a state. And if you talk a state, they think that you're talking against their religion. And it is no different than our current conversation, where people are, this is what's happening. And this is constant, even with a lot of questions coming, because they're valid questions. However, people are asking estate questions and not understanding a state. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Whether they're talking about buying.
Like once you claim your property.
It doesn't happen like that.
How do you keep with the Colonial? How do you keep the colonizers off?
So now, aren't you going back to treaty? Aren't you going back to estate and trust? See, the way they've been doing it, now let's go back to our earlier conversation. How have they been stealing or cheating our people's estates? Misclassifying our people, right? Mm-hmm. Then claiming them as U.S. citizens, and our people think it means a benefit. They don't know it means stock. Then making a bond on them, selling it on the world market as a derivative, and you are now the surety for any debts that they create. That's exactly what that is. That's not an opinion. That's exactly what's going on. Then if it's questioned, not unlike like you were saying, Lamont was telling you, the magistrate said, you volunteered. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But let's look at our people always talking about they're so spiritual. And you give them basic facts that a child could understand without, if they didn't have an agenda, and adults have the most difficult time to rationalize. It's really interesting. Meaning that if you put before a child, the average child, right, different colors in a palette of primary colors and things like that, or say little blocks, one with a letter on it and one with say objects on it, like a boat or a car, even though children may say humorous things, they usually can make the distinction. It's interesting that adults have problems with that, even knowing the difference between buying or owning and a tenant, allodial and feudal, which are opposites. And it takes place every day in all your affairs. Do you understand where I'm coming from with that? That the difficulty for them to know better.
Well, we come to the end of the road.
Anyway, so you get with Dr. G.
Don't everybody send me no request for that right
no,
away.
No,
This
not
this
right
is
away.
not the
It'll be
PDF thingy. No,
it.
don't look, because jumping in the
Yeah,
deep.
explain yourself, because I don't know they're gonna beat you up.
Oh, no, because you know, Great Sheik, you putting that on me. We have to figure out how to get
See,
it
because
from that paper.
it's like this.
Do not.
Yes, this is later.
When
Say
it's
next
a-
month. Give us
When
time.
it's available, I will make the announcement.
Yes.
Do not email me for that. I will let you know.
Yeah.
Please.
But anyway, get grounded in because this is basic. Listen, this is basic third grade civic knowledge. Truthfully. And definitely elementary and junior high school knowledge. Not college, not university, elementary school level knowledge to show you how far you have been deliberately, not accidentally, kicked behind the 8 ball. Some of the stuff may be, revolutionary, or a great revolution or revelation to some of you. This is basic civics. We need to get over our egos and accept that we've been cheated, because we have, and we're suffering from it. It's just that we're in such a serious condition right now that they're literally killing people off under the guise of viruses and other things like that, so that they don't have to answer up to the treaties that they have violated, and that they have created so much destruction around the world that nations of the world have frozen up the credit windows and frozen up the trade windows. And that's a lot of what's really going on, that they're covering up with this virus claim and other things. Not that those things aren't weaponized biological warfare, because they actually are. But people are looking at, I was walking down the street and I was getting ready to go to the store over here. And just as soon as I went and opened up the door, a virus locked the door. And I was pushing the door, and COVID wouldn't let the door open. My cousin took his dog for a walk. And he had to take the dog to the vet last night. You want to know why? The dog ran across the street, but it was a red light, and he got hit. Boy, that was a COVID car. Our people really sometimes demonstrate they're not very bright. However, we got to get over this. We got to get basic and fundamental civics and how things really work. Anyway, thank you for sharing this evening with us. And like I said, we had a lot to do and a lot of things to support. And in the future, I'm going to bring a couple of cases on allodial title claims, that some which are presently taking place, etc., and share with you to get you in the proper state of mind. So support the House of Reawakening Minds, because the House of Reawakening Minds supports you. Thank you. Have a grand evening.
Thank you all for tuning in, and we will be back with next week. And Brother Abdullah, Brother Shem Malachi, they will be on next week. The following week, we will have Grand Sheik returning on our third Friday. But on Tuesday, make sure you tune in to Office Hours with Dr. G right here on this channel when my guest will be red pill and blue pill. So don't want to miss that. And the following week with Brother Sabir Bey. So you're going to want to tune in and to those shows. We thank you so much. We do thank you for your support. We thank you. Visit our Cash App. Those of you who already have sent in a donation, thank you very much. Those of you who never have, your support would be very much appreciated. I think that's all I really need to say, and I do appreciate it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.
This is on your desk. I'm gonna leave it right there.